that she's going to be making that call. She knows how the format evolved from regionals to internationals all the way through to this final tournament. And there we do have the teams on the screen.
All right, Trista, currently on the left-hand side of your screen, will be running a team of Togedemaru, Tapu Fini, Arcanine, Gyarados, Garchomp, and Celesteela versus Kamran's team of Garchomp, Salamence, Tapu Bulu, Politoed, Tapu Koko, and Metagross. Already, we're seeing, 3 of the possible 4 terrains coming into play of this game.
Well, Kamran, the one thing I have to touch on here is that team selection that he's brought with him. Now, this team is something that has been talked about in the build-up to this tournament. A lot of people making memes about this thing, really talking about Salamence and Metagross. Metamence, as it's known to its friends, is a potent combination. As you said, we touched on it in the terrain section. The Bulldoze onto the Metagross, holding the weakness policy, weakened by the Tapu Bulu, is very, very good. And of course, we have the Politoed. So, you can basically take away a number of Metagross's weaknesses with this team. The Fire-type weakness, of course, going to be reduced by that Rain from Politoed. Not the usual setter of Rain, I would like to point out. That Ground-type weakness, as long as it's Earthquake, Bulldoze, or Magnitude, being taken away by that Tapu Bulu. So, it's going to be such an interesting kind of setup for the pair of them as they play this game. I think a lot on Kamran's team kind of relies on how he plays it out. I'd love to see if he can get all of those pieces set up and moving.
All right, Kamran sending out that combination of Salamence and Metagross versus Trista's lead of Togedemaru and Celesteela.
Well, very interesting to see that Salamence and Metagross put immediately together. Both these players sitting on a 1-0 record. We didn't touch on that. But the Togedemaru in play for Trista. It's going to be Trista on the bottom of your screen, while Cam's is actually on the top. So overall, a very interesting lead. Metagross and Salamence could do well here. If Salamence feels it has the opportunity to Bulldoze, it's not going to catch that Celesteela, but would do so much to that Togedemaru. That means Kamran's probably forced to play with that kind of Salamence, maybe neutered, and Trista likely having to throw the fake out from this Togedemaru into that Salamence slot.
And that is exactly what we see. Metagross following up with a Zen Headbutt, going to target down that Togedemaru for a nice amount of damage. Celesteela revealing that it's carrying Hidden Power, attacking that Salamence, and it is super effective. So that is either a Dragon or maybe an Ice-type Hidden Power.
Yes, Hidden Power Ice is something that a lot of people have been looking at throughout the course of the history of the video game championships, but not been so popular in the previous years. It's changed a little bit since the glory days of 2011, 2012, and doing that much damage to Salamence is so important, but both players trading a little bit, not quite a knockout. Togedemaru taking damage from Zen Headbutt, though, I think is very important. Because of its typing, it's exceptionally weak to a potential Bulldoze from this Salamence. If it can get that off, it might get a knockout now, because the Zen Headbutt has broken any potential focus sashes. Togedemaru is going to try and defend itself, though.
Zing Zap into that Salamence, but Salamence is not knocked out, firing off a Flamethrower into that Togedemaru for the knockout. So no Bulldoze or any form of speed control from that Salamence quite yet, but still able to get the knockout that I think Trista was looking for. Zen Headbutt into that Celesteela, who fires off a Leech Seed back into that Metagross.
I think the interesting to look at here is really how Trista's played that Togedemaru. Now, Togedemaru appeared in one of our earlier regional championships, and then it's going to be able to do a little bit to help its team. It's not there to deal damage, it's actually there to help something set up. In this case, it's Celesteela, and it's using a very slow-paced move in Leech Seed. What it will be doing is setting a seed on that Pokemon as long as it remains on the field. We've got it on our little tip over there, basically healing you up while slowly damaging your opponent. That is so interesting because it forces you to force switches. Try not to stick around after that Leech Seed. And if you're forced into switching, then you're really able to try and capitalize off that. So I'm certainly interested to see how that one affects the flow of things in this game.
Definitely. Arcanine out on the field for Kamran there, or Trista, excuse me. Arcanine intimidating that Salamence, not going to be much helpful here because Salamence has only used special attacks so far in this game. And Metagross's Clear Body ability will actually ignore that stat drop entirely.
Well, now we see the Arcanine come into play. You have to wonder how he's going to kind of protect, the Metagross. That's so important to see how that goes, and Garchomp's a pretty solid answer to Arcanine here.
Garchomp definitely happy to soak up those fire attacks, but Arcanine not falling for it, using the extreme speed to knock out that Salamence before it has a chance to attack. Garchomp dodging the Air Slash from that Celesteela.
Yeah, not getting any damage, and of course resetting that potential leech sheet. So Celesteela isn't going to be covering any health between this. We do of course see it just play out very, very wisely, and now Kamran in a really good position to basically bring in the Tapu Koko, and there he's able to put pressure on this Celesteela. A lot of damage potentially coming towards that Arcanine because Garchomp hasn't been intimidated. I think that's something that really affects the matchup between Garchomp and Arcanine, because after an Intimidate, Arcanine can actually stick around a little bit. We did see the electric terrain come into play, which means that this Celesteela, if caught by an electric type attack, is going to be taking huge damage.
Yeah, Celesteela, though, not going to be caught. Instead, Tapu Fini taking the field, removing the electric terrain with its own Misty terrain. Arcanine using Protect here to prevent itself from taking any damage from the Pokemon on Kamran's side of the field. Thunderbolt into the Tapu Fini, and then Garchomp using Rock Slide, not going to damage the Arcanine, but will connect with the Tapu Fini to bring it just below half of its health remaining.
Yes, bringing that Tapu Fini low on health is very important because it's a naturally bulky Pokemon that's certainly harder to knock out. But, as we talked about in the pre-game, changing that terrain means you limit the damage output of Tapu Koko, and the Thunderbolt not quite as potent. So, it is going to help out a little bit. Of course, Misty Terrain would reduce the damage of any Dragon-type attacks, but this year, Garchomp hasn't brought them to the party at all.
No Dragon-type attack quite yet. Garchomp protecting this turn. Tapu Koko using Skydrop to take Tapu Fini up into the sky with it, preventing it from attacking this turn. And Arcanine left Flare Blitzing into the missing Tapu Koko.
Yes, that's something that is a big deal. Skydrop getting you out of the way for a full turn is so helpful. Most players, though, use it when they're trying to set something up. So Kamran here may be a little bit defensive, maybe not trying to set up something like the common Swords Dance on Garchomp. Might have been able to capitalize a little bit more on that turn, but overall, you know, this Tapu Fini is not going to be in play. Maybe he was predicting a Protect on Arcanine, the safe kind of play that he's seeing this turn from Trista.
Celesteela taking the place of that Arcanine as Tapu Koko returns the Tapu Fini to the ground. Tapu Fini free to attack, but Garchomp going for a Groundium Z move. If this goes into that Celesteela, this could be a huge amount of wasted potential.
This could be a big deal where it goes. It is going for the attack, and we do see the Tectonic Rage, so that is going to mean it is going to be connecting with that Tapu Fini. Very, very smart play there from Kamran to not fall into Trista's traps. Switching in that Celesteela to try and avoid it altogether was going to be a big play, but getting rid of Tapu Fini so essential. That means if we do see the switch out on Tapu Koko, it's going to be easy to get that electric terrain back in play. And now I think Garchomp just able to maybe deal a little bit of damage, do a little bit more, before it isn't needed on the field anymore. It's so important to see how this one turns out. But getting rid of that Tapu Fini was very, very important, especially after that Skydrop turn didn't quite pay off.
You know, it was a great form of synergy, I think, between the Tapu Koko and the Garchomp. Since Tapu Koko took Tapu Fini up into the sky, it couldn't protect, thus ensuring that Kamran's Garchomp's Z move will connect.
Yeah, that's so essential. And seeing, I think, Trista leave Arcanine in for an extra turn was something that he used to his advantage to make those predictions that she was trying to bait out something like a Z move and then bring in Celesteela a turn later. Doesn't appear to have worked so much, and with that Intimidate, that's going to be, I think, Trista's best way back in, is keeping these things in check, but she's not going to be able to switch to try and get any more value out of it.
Metagross taking the field for Garchomp. Volt Switch from that Tapu Koko, allowing Kamran to send the Garchomp back out onto the field without that Intimidate drop from the Arcanine. So a lot of great defensive synergy here, getting that Metagross in play, getting that Garchomp in play, and knowing that neither of them would be intimidated. But Arcanine with that Flare Blitz going to crash into the Garchomp for not a lot of damage at all, activating Garchomp's Rough Skin ability and taking some damage in return, also from the recoil of its own move. Celesteela with the Hidden Power Ice into the Metagross. Assuming it's ice, it's not very effective to end the turn.
Yeah, it would have been a little bit better if it was going into that Garchomp slot, maybe predicting the Garchomp to come in that place, but it didn't get the knockout there. And we do see a little bit of an uphill struggle, I think, for Trista now. The meta grows interesting at this point of the game for Kamran because it's not really able to pull its weight here. It isn't going to be facing off too well against Arcanine. We have seen there's no rain to defend it, and it's really curious to see how this one will end up planning out. I like the way that he's just removed it from play here, knowing it's not getting top value out of it.
Tapu Koko taking its place and bringing back with it the electric terrain, going to boost all of its electric type attacks. Arcanine protecting this turn, not wanting to take damage maybe from an earthquake or in this case a rock slide from that Garchomp. It will connect with the Celesteela, deal a little bit of damage, but the big question here is will that Celesteela flinch? It does not. Hidden power into that Garchomp. It's going to be super effective, but Garchomp is just barely hanging on.
Very smart play there, I think, from Trista to try and open up the door a little bit by getting damage down on the Garchomp. May put it in range for potentially extreme speed knockout, but you still have to be so worried about this Tapu Koko. That's the big thing that Kamran has on the side of him right now, is that Tapu Koko is really left unchecked. We see it just starting the turn with big damage.
Thunderbolt from that Tapu Koko into the Arcanine, dealing enough damage to activate its Berry in a pinch, getting its health back with that Mago Berry. Celesteela dodging the Rock Slide. It does connect with the Arcanine. It brings it right back down into the red. Arcanine flinches and is unable to move. Celesteela, the only Pokemon attacking on Trista's side of the field this turn, with a heavy slam into that Tapu Koko for a critical hit.
I think if we'd seen the Arcanine attack from Trista's side of the field, we could have had a much different game here, because double targeting that Tapu Koko would have opened up the door. Garchomp is going to struggle with potential rock slides, and that could have been very different. Of course, if the Tapu Koko had gone down, then Garchomp was liable to get knocked out by an extreme speed, and Celesteela could start doing the Celesteela wall that it's been really well known for, especially against that Metagross in the back. So overall, I think Trista really needed a little bit more out of her Arcanine, and that flinch so essential in not being able to allow her to play. Tapu Koko would have taken so much with a Flare Blitz.
Trista going for the knockout on that Tapu Koko anyways with an extreme speed, but it misses it. Tapu Koko Thunderbolt into the Celesteela for the knockout, and provided Garchomp is able to connect and attack with that Arcanine this turn, it indeed does with the Rock Slide. Game one goes to Kamran.
Yes, game one falling in Kamran's favor. That flinch on Arcanine, so essential. And I think we're seeing a lot of people pick up Rock Slide on their Garchomp, but overall, he used the Metagross wisely, forced a certain way of play around it, and overall kind of was in a solid position to do well with that. I liked how he played that game. We didn't see the classic combination of the Salamence and the Metagross on the field together, so that may be an inclination that this team can play multiple ways.
And that's what I think you need to look for when team building for the Pokemon World Championships. Even though your team may have sort of a obvious mode, if you will, you know, you see the Bulu, you see the Salamence, you see the Metagross, and you think, oh, I know what that's going to do. I will bring some Pokemon to counter it. That wasn't the case here, and that slight advantage in game one can lead you into a really great spot for game two. You know, your opponent starts asking themselves, well, you know, will they bring the Bulldoze and activate maybe the weakness policy on the Metagross? I don't know. And there's a lot more mind games going on right now.
I think Trista played the Togedemaru well, but it was a little bit linear. She knew she had to shut down Salamence because of the fear of Bulldoze. And really, Kamran just played around that. He got some damage down with Zen Headbutt, ignored the Focus Sash, and that kind of linear gameplay isn't going to work again in game two. She has to change something up. The onus is on Trista to really deal with that as quickly as possible.
She certainly has the tools, I think, to do so. We haven't seen that Garchomp yet, but it does carry with it an Intimidate, so maybe having two Intimidators on her team might help her weaken the Garchomp so it doesn't deal as much damage moving forwards. Gyarados also, you know, it hovers in the air. She could possibly bring her own Garchomp with it to, you know, deal some damage with her own Earthquake or her own Rock Slide or whatever other moves that Garchomp holds.
I'd be curious to see how she uses this combination of Arcanine and Gyarados, not just in this match, of course, but throughout the course of the tournament. It's been talked about a lot as this potential answer to some of these things that have been a little bit difficult. And we did see the Garchomp was so important, I think, for Kamran there. So being able to switch that up not be as much of a problem with it with a double Intimidate is wise, but you get no value of it against Metagross, purely because Metagross has the clear body ability.
Salamence' Intimidate from Kamran's side of the field, weakening the attack of the Togedemaru and Garchomp on Trista's side of the field. That Metagross rounding out Kamran's lead.
Yeah, the Metagross and Salamence, a classic pairing. It's been seen before in previous years, but coming back this year towards the end of the season as a potential meta-defining team. Be very interesting to watch its progress over the course of the weekend. But against Garchomp and Togedemaru, it certainly has to be careful. I know we talked a little bit, of course, about Garchomp not having a Dragon-type move in most cases, but if there is an option for it to come out, now would be a great time.
Fake out from the Togedemaru, Sword Stance from the Garchomp on Trista's side of the field, boosting its attack by 2 stages. Metagross with the Zen Headbutt again going to target down not the Togedemaru, instead the Garchomp this turn for a nice amount of damage, taking some damage in recoil.
Well, we see Kamran there playing the game a little differently because of what happened in turn 1 of the last game. Now this Garchomp's set up for a pretty limited kind of trade in that regard. It does, of course, take a little bit of damage from Zen Headbutt, but Togedemaru is still in play with full health and a potential Focus Sash available, and Garchomp is now threatening anything with a +2 attack. Likely going to be a Tectonic Rage onto something, because you don't want to be hitting your partner Togedemaru. It isn't the Air Balloon, we did not see that on the way in. And this switch may be giving an inclination to what kind of attack we'll be seeing.
Well, Celesteela is happy to float in the air for as long as it can, so if Garchomp were to attack this turn, it would not take any damage. Instead, Garchomp protects as Salamence finally uses that Bulldoze attack. It's only going to deal damage to the Metagross on its side of the field, but I think that was what Kamran was hoping for. We see an item activate. It is that weakness policy, and it'll sharply raise the attack and special attack of that Metagross, who tries to use Meteor Mash to attack the Garchomp to end the turn.
Well, I think what we saw there was Kamran really wanted that Garchomp to not be going first, wanted to get a Bulldoze on it and be able to deal with it, and probably tidy it up with Metagross. He is a little bit scared. Garchomp at +1 attack due to the Intimidate is still looking exceptionally likely to do damage to Metagross, and exceptionally likely to do enough damage to take a knockout there. So that's something he has to be very careful of. Of course, if we do see Trista go for the Earthquake, Garchomp isn't going to be getting anything down on the Salamence, and that's something you can't afford to do right now.
Trista saving the Garchomp for later, sending out the Togedemaru in its place. Metagross protecting this turn, not wanting to risk taking damage from that Garchomp. Salamence with the Dragon Pulse to attack the Togedemaru on the switch for a little bit of damage, and Celesteela finishing up the turn with a Leech Seed into that, protecting Metagross.
Yeah, well, Togedemaru taking that little bit of chip damage is going to be so important. But it's a bit of information about Kamran's team that Trista now has. Knowing that Garchomp can't stay in against this Salamence, has to be so aware of it. And that's something that you just need to know in these kind of sets. Togedemaru, though, feeling comfortable enough to not use Fake Out.
Togedemaru happy to use its speed to go faster than that Metagross and lock it into Protect with an Encore. Bulldoze from that Salamence to knock out the Togedemaru and deal a little bit of damage to Metagross, but I think Togedemaru did its job on this one. Metagross is able to protect again this turn, and Celesteela again with the Leech Seed into the protecting Metagross, but overall such a great play and really an interesting use of Togedemaru.
Yeah, it certainly is. Togedemaru using Encore, forcing Metagross to protect, but even though it protected the previous turn, it manages to pull off another protect, and that's something that's so important. Getting those coin flips to fall in your favor, because it's a very limited chance that you do get to protect twice in a row, but getting those is big, and not getting the Leech Seed down means that it could switch a little more leisurely, or it could stay in for another turn to take the Leech Seed before switching. I don't think it's too worried about the Tapu Fini, while Salamence may be a little bit worried about a Fairy-type attack. Metagross is still in a pretty good position. Salamence can also do some good damage back to something like the Celesteela with the Flamethrower we saw from Game 1.
Tapu Koko taking the place of the Metagross on the field and bringing with it that electric terrain. Salamence moves next with a Flamethrower to attack that Celesteela for a nice amount of super effective damage. Not enough for maybe a 2 or 3 hit knockout, but, you know, a nice amount. Tapu Fini revealing a little bit more about itself, using Calm Mind to boost its special attack and special defense.
Well,
and one more Leech Seed there from that Celesteela, finally connecting with the Pokemon. In this case, it's that Tapu Koko.
Yeah, but I don't think the Leech Seed alone is going to be enough to force this Tapu Koko away from the Tapu Fini on Trista's side. Basically, that Tapu Fini is in there now. It probably wants to try and stay in as long as possible because it did set up the Carmine, but it's such a difficult place to justify staying in on. Tapu Koko in electric terrain is going to be doing so much damage. Big damage from even a Thunderbolt. Doesn't even require a Z Crystal to do ridiculous amounts of damage. And Tapu Fini, even with a boosted stage of special defense, is going to struggle to take multiple turns of that. So that's something that Trista's going to have to be very, very careful of. Celesteela taking that little bit of damage will be sticking around even longer because of the Leech Seed, but something this Salamence is in a decent position to try and deal with.
Garchomp taking the place of the Celesteela, happy to take that Thunderbolt without dealing any damage, but Kamran calling the switch, goes for a Dragon Pulse into the Garchomp and almost gets that knockout. Tapu Fini fires back a Moonblast into the Tapu Koko, but it's not going to do enough to even put it or threaten it of a knockout for the next turn.
And that's a very interesting play. We see one of these classic double target turns coming in from Kamran. He goes all in on the slot on our right. If the Celesteela stays in, it gets caught by Thunderbolt. If the Garchomp comes in, it gets caught by Dragon Pulse. And that's such top-tier play. He doesn't get anything knocked out in return for it, though. Tapu Fini does not manage to retaliate with like a Moonblast or a Dazzling Gleam on something such as Salamence to take a knockout. So it certainly struggles a little bit to kind of justify that turn. But Tapu Fini being left alone is really good news for Trista. Tapu Fini is something you need to invest a little bit of time in, a calm mind, maybe get some turns for leftovers. And that's going to be really big if it can stay safe and attacks can head towards this Protect from Trista.
Garchomp protects as Tapu Koko goes for a Volt Switch into the Tapu Fini, giving Kamran the chance to save that Tapu Koko for later and maybe bring back that electric terrain, depending on how Trista decides to play this. It seems like Tapu Fini is content to stick around for now, though, as Metagross takes the field in that Tapu Koko's place. Dragon Pulse from the Salamence into the protecting Garchomp, and Tapu Fini with that Moonblast going to attack the Metagross, formerly that Tapu Koko, for just a little bit of health.
I think Trista really needs to start looking at the Salamence. It's been putting such good pressure down with that Dragon Pulse. It's actually forcing the way she plays her Garchomp. Her hand is being forced every single turn to see how this goes. And Metagross is still in a pretty solid position. A lot of Metagross carrying Bullet Punch. Now Garchomp's low. It's not getting any more recovery from the Leech Seed because there was a switch in play. Maybe we'll just start picking up knockouts, and that's why we see switches coming in from Trista here.
Celesteela taking the place of that Garchomp, happy to take a couple of Dragon Pulses if it has to. Bullet Punch from the Metagross into the Celesteela, looking to knock out that Garchomp before it can attack, but instead targeting that Celesteela with a Flamethrower from that Salamence. Kamran reading that switch beautifully, bringing Celesteela down to below half its health, and it's going to eat Wiki Berry, so that must have been exactly 25% of its health. Muddy Water from the Tapu Fini misses the Metagross, instead targets that Salamence. It's not very effective, and there's no accuracy drop.
Yeah, 51 hit points all out. We'll get it on that Celesteela. A very nice round number for me to do some on-the-fly math there. But again, another turn where Salamence is ignored. And Celesteela coming in, yes, it got the activation of its Wiki Berry there, so it is a little bit healthier than it could have been. But another very smart double target from Kamran to basically put the pressure on, really turn the screw a little bit early in the game, and basically read the prediction, or make predictions, reading the switches very, very well. Knowing that something's coming in, you can cover your bases. You saw it detect or protect last turn. Don't allow it, and then keep on going. So very smart play to keep going for actually the right-hand slot.
Metagross protecting this turn. Salamence using Flamethrower again to attack that Celesteela. It's going to bring it back down to maybe about 40% of its health, and Tapu Fini, reading the Protect, goes for a Calm Mind to boost its special attack and special defense one stage further.
That's something Tapu Fini needs to do, because we do know Trista is aware, of course, of that Tapu Koko in the back.
And Hidden Power from that Celesteela into the Salamence to finish the turn, and an added bonus, the electric terrain has just left the field.
It did end for now, so it's not really a big deal. I don't think it affects too much of the play that we have at the moment. But when Tapu Koko comes in, it will reset it. Of course, if you bring it in before the terrain leaves, then you don't reset it and you remain on the old counter, meaning a limited amount of turns to capitalize on it. Now, with the combination that Trista have on the field, Tapu Koko is something she really doesn't want to deal with. And I think Tapu Fini setting up with these Calm Minds means not only can it maybe withstand a hit, but it might be able to get a knockout in retaliation. It's a very close play, depending, of course, how this game comes down to the wire.
Bullet Punch into the Celesteela, trying to do just a little bit more damage, so the Flamethrower from that Salamence will be enough to knock it out. Will it do enough damage? It is! Celesteela getting that knockout. Tapu Fini left on Trista's side of the field to try and attack with a Muddy Water, but it misses that Metagross for the second time in this game. Going to connect with that Salamence, and it does just not enough for that knockout.
Even with the Calm Minds, we see that Tapu Fini just isn't this major offensive threat, and knowing that the Calm Minds aren't enough to boost it up, it's very, very interesting to see how these calculations will come into play. Now, both the Pokemon on the field are very low on health indeed, but these are Trista's last two, and she's going to have to get a lot more out of them. With Tapu Koko in play in the back, Garchomp is probably readily able to get knocked out, of course, if the Tapu Koko is carrying something like the Dazzling Gleam. Now, the interesting decision that, as we kind of play out this game, I think Trista's going to have to make is it even carrying Dazzling Gleam? Because a lot of people have given up on that towards the end of the season.
Metagross and Garchomp both protecting themselves this turn. Salamence with a Bulldoze looking to lower the speed of that Garchomp, of that Tapu Fini. In this case, it's only going to connect with the Tapu Fini. Tapu Fini isn't really the fastest Pokemon to begin with. We know that Tapu Koko is faster already, so might not be that helpful. But Salamence dodges the Muddy Water.
That's really big that it doesn't get knocked out there. And Kamran, with 4 Pokemon remaining, is in a very solid position indeed to not try and deal with this right now. This Tapu Fini's just not provided enough for Trista. That's the important thing. It hasn't had enough value, and I think Kamran's played this game absolutely fantastically. Salamence Metagross as a combination have been really nasty together, and of course the avoids have helped a little bit. But I really like how the Bulldoze set up the Metagross, how it kind of forced the play all around Metagross. And Trista's really played into it, I think. She's allowed herself to be red, and she doesn't have many options to stop that.
Bullet Punch from the Metagross into that Garchomp, who tried to protect for a second turn, but unfortunately was not able to do so, and it gets knocked out. Salamence next with the Roost to restore its health. That's not something you see often on Salamence at all, and this is the perfect time to use it when it's just holding on barely. Muddy Water again from that Tapu Fini, again missing this Salamence. Finally connects with that Metagross though, knocks it out, but with 3-on-1, that Tapu Fini might not just have enough energy left to finish this matchup.
Yeah, there's so many things on Kamran's team that can basically deal with this. Garchomp is actually one of the lesser options that deal with Tapu Fini. Obviously, Tech Rage would do very nicely because it's not affected by those Calm Mind boosts. But get some Tech Rage damage down with, obviously, Tectonic Rage, the Z move. And then Salamence, can just start chipping away at it. It's not going to go for anything with the Dragon-type attacks. It's got Flamethrower, which is also not very effective. And you do have to wonder if he's going to be keeping things secret. Bulldoze may be the best play for it before Tapu Koko comes into play.
Well, here is that Z move from Kamran. Like you said, it's that Tectonic Rage going to target down that Tapu Fini, deal a nice amount of damage. It is a physical attack as well, which means we don't have to worry about those special defense boosts, but might be enough to just outright knock it out. We'll have to see.
Yeah, it's going to be very close, but many Tapu Fini cannot take a Tectonic Rage comfortably, and about 60% of its health remaining was enough to get knocked out, so 2-0 for Kamran Jahadi in this set. Trista, 1-1 now. Her Worlds Invite, I had some interesting numbers about these two. They were both on that kind of lower end of players coming into it. And they came in with Trista 520 championship points, Kamran just the 533. So these are the players I touched on a little bit earlier with, they have a point to prove coming along to these tournaments. That game I thought was very well played, even though the scoreline not quite reflective of it. And Kamran tapping into this new team very, very well indeed. Capitalizing on something that's the new hotness, playing it so well and seeing why it has one of these really good matchups.
Yeah, I found it really interesting that, we didn't see Tapu Bulu at all. He, quite frankly, didn't even need it for that matchup.
Not at all.
And he really didn't need that weakness policy boost either. He certainly utilized it in Game 2, but Game 1, it felt like he was making all the right reads and just playing that team so that he didn't have to rely on the weakness policy boost to really give Metagross that offensive pressure that I feel like some people just assume that it kind of lacks normally.
Yes, I think it's very interesting to see how that kind of comes together as a team. And the things that get left on the bench are super important. But as I was kind of alluding to earlier, both these players sneaking in with the kind of just getting their day 1 invite. And these are the players I really want to look at in team building. We have some information on how many games they've played this season. And you'll actually find Trista has played a significant number more. She's actually played 188 competitive Pokemon matches this season.
Wow.
To Kamran's 143. So very, very good. They have similar win percentages in that mid-60s. But these are the players who have very good knowledge, because of the amount they've played, of team selections. They've seen teams from Premier Challengers, from Regionals, from the Internationals. And with that information, you can make an assessment of the World Championship format before you come to it. Now, the reason I think this is so interesting in this matchup is Kamran's picked the Metagross and Salamence combination that is very, very good. Very, very popular and really heavily discussed. And Trista's picked up on this Togedemaru and Double Intimidator, Gyarados Arcanine, which a lot of people have been looking at. Double Intimidator has been very, very good, but this just wasn't the matchup for it, unfortunately.
No, Double Intimidate. I mean, we keep talking about past World Championships. That always seems to make an appearance at the World stage. It's just something that's, consistently reliable, especially if you can keep switching your Pokemon in and out, and if your opponent relies on Pokemon that are very physically offensive.
It's certainly a good one if you get the right matchup for it. With the prevalence of Tapu Koko, I think Gyarados as the second Intimidator is always going to struggle a little bit. I think that's something that I'm curious to see how that comes together. Which teams can use it, especially when you don't protect it with something like a Marowak. So both these teams, and actually all 4 of the teams we've seen so far today in the primary games, have been so interesting. I love looking at how these teams are built, why people pick certain Pokemon or archetypes, and that's something I want to explore over the course of the day, because as I spoke about with Evan, we are going to be able to pick up on this on day 2, where day 2 players are going to have seen this.
All right, well, let's take a moment to talk to Kamran about maybe how he built his team and what was his inspiration going into this past round. Anna, take it away.
Thanks, guys. I am here with self-professed young millennial Kamran. You seem to be feeling pretty good.
Young money.
Yeah?
It was a really good match. For y'all that actually care about the Pokemon, Trista played really well, leading Togedemaru Celesteela, because my Bulu mode was probably the best answer to a Togedemaru Finny or Togedemaru Gyarados. But I saw those two together, I'm like, let me just not bring Bulu, see what happens. Worked out really well. She had some unfortunate misses, but that's Pokemon. We're both veterans. We've both been playing for God knows how long, so you deal with it. It just happens.
Our casters were just talking about that, how long you guys have been playing, how long you've had to kind of observe the landscape of Pokemon. What did you come into this tournament expecting, and how did that play out in this match?
So like real talk, I've been testing with, like, thank God for One Sock, man. That guy has saved me so much. One Sock, Tommy, Chemo, like I needed so much World's help because I didn't get what all throughout this year. I'm like, I know the call here, I know the call here, I know, and the Worlds comes, I'm like, I don't know the call. Nothing seems good. Like I was running Mandibus Finny for a long time, and it looked really good, but it wasn't consistent enough. So I was like, One Sock, I like men's Metagross, let's build around that. We built around it, and I was like I sent him my 6, and he looks at it, he's like, this is really good. I'm like, no, this is young.
It's young? What does young mean?
No, like young, like it's good. Like if it's young, you're gonna run it. Like you're gonna do well if it's young.
And how do you see this playing out in the rest of the tournament? Because we're early on right now. Does this match make you feel confident, or are you feeling like you still have lots to do?
I have a lot to do. The last time I was at Worlds and did very well was 2011. That's when I won Worlds, but I had to go through the LCQ. It's a lot of Swiss rounds, and you can never get cocky at any point. Like, I say my team is young. I know I'm young, but at the same time, I still have to try my best. And Trista Medine is a great opponent. She played amazingly, and I mean, I don't know what, like, you can't underestimate any of your opponents. I feel like a lot of people have that problem, like, especially the first regionals that came out, like, oh, I lost because he had this random Z move, not because he was good. It's like, well, they prepared for the matchup. Why didn't you? Stuff like that, you know?
That's a really good point. Speaking of really good competitors, as you look forward, are there any competitors that you're specifically looking forward to facing, or anyone that you're a little bit nervous about?
I don't know. I haven't been looking at the teams too much. People have been scouting teams. When I saw Trista, I was actually really scared because we've been playing for a long time. I think she started in Journey Across America. I started 2000. I mean, I watched Journey Across America, but I didn't start playing until 2008. So when I saw the name, I'm like, I've known her for a long time. It's really scary to play her. I've never played like on stream at a big event, so that was pretty cool. Never gotten this interview. You know, I've been looking forward to it.
Well, me too. And congratulations, of course, to Trista. Congratulations to you. Best of